My sister and parents attacked me for eating lunch at the hospital cafeteria. Once a week, I go eat at the hospital cafeteria, but my sister and parents say that's wrong. I work just a few blocks from the hospital and get there quickly by bike. They have a cozy cafeteria with reasonable prices, so I usually go there for lunch once a week. The food isn't anything incredible, but sometimes there's a decent selection. The staff already recognize me and are always friendly. They don't care that I just come to eat, and it's much quieter there than in any local restaurant. I have autism and I don't like loud noises, so quiet lunches in this place are a real lifesaver for me. Recently, my sister found out that I eat at the hospital cafeteria and gave me a scolding, saying those cafeterias are only for people who are at the hospital out of necessity. I argued that I'm bringing them money and I'm not taking food from patients. I only go once a week, so what's the problem? But she still insisted I was doing something wrong. Then she dragged our parents into it and they took her side. They said I should only eat at the hospital if I have a real reason to be there. I told them they were nuts. It's just regular food that I pay for. Now, since none of us wants to back down, I'm torn. I go eat at the hospital cafeteria once a week simply because it's near my work. So before we move to the update, feel free to comment below with your opinion about the author's situation. Personally, I think no, he's not in the wrong, because it's completely normal to go eat at a hospital cafeteria. When I was in the maternity ward with my wife after we had a baby, I also ate at the hospital cafeteria and saw nothing wrong with it. I saw med students eating there. They weren't admitted to the hospital, but they still came. Yeah, the food's not top tier, but it's cheap and decent, and you can eat peacefully like the author said. So for me, it's all okay. What do you think? Update 1. The situation got completely insane. I never imagined my sister could do something like this. Recently, I'm 23. I asked for advice because my parents and sister were mad that I eat at the hospital cafeteria since it's near my job. I like the quiet and peace there on the days I go. But the situation escalated so fast I still can't believe such nonsense went that far. My sister acted petty and completely baseless. When she found out I eat at the hospital cafeteria, she freaked out and yelled that the food is only for those admitted to the hospital. We argued hard, and I told her I'm not taking meals from patients. Then she, as usual, ran to our parents, and they took her side, just like I expected, supporting her idea that it's not right to go to the hospital cafeteria just to eat. We argued for days. They kept drilling into me that I was wrong and demanded I stop going. So I posted about it online. And everyone in the comments said I wasn't doing anything wrong. Turns out it's pretty normal to eat in a hospital cafeteria just because you like it. I hoped it would calm down. But a few days later, my sister called and asked if I stopped eating at the hospital. I said no. And it all started again. My parents called, furious like I was obligated to obey them just because they said so. I reminded them I don't live with them anymore and that this is exactly why I moved out. They always take her side. Of course they protested, but this time the fight didn't stay in the family. Other relatives found out because my sister started trying to rally support. She pushed so hard to force her will on me that she started looking for help elsewhere. But my parents were the only ones on her side. When I told my uncle what happened, he personally chewed them out over the phone. He said they always defend my sister because she's their favorite and that they're terrible parents for allowing such favoritism. Then my cousin went to lunch with me at the same cafeteria. He also works nearby and bikes there. We'd actually bumped into each other there before, and he was pleasantly surprised by how much healthier the food was than other places. He's kind of picky about food, so it became his new lunch spot. My sister flipped out even more when she found out other family members were now eating at the hospital cafeteria. When everything came out, my parents were embarrassed and backed down. They apologized to me and gave me some nonsense about how they genuinely thought eating at the hospital cafeteria was weird and just felt like they needed to defend my sister. I told them they've enabled her for so long that now it's the only thing they do when she gets into a fight. She treats me like a condescending, controlling school bully, even though she's older. And they just keep pouring fuel on the fire. I told them I'm not putting up with it anymore. In the end, my parents admitted they were wrong and apologized again. Then they made my sister apologize too, and it was obvious she hated doing it. At first, she tried to mumble through it. Later, my parents invited me to dinner as another apology, but it felt more like a show for the family because they had already told everyone about it. The dinner itself was great. They made turkey, probably one of my favorite dishes. I love drumsticks with gravy. Yeah, I make a bit of a mess when I eat them, but I can't help it. My sister always found it funny, and it was one of the rare times I didn't mind her teasing me, so I didn't think much of why she was giggling during dinner. Later that night, after the family dinner, I noticed my bicycle was gone. I had parked it in the backyard where I couldn't see it from the living room window, but it had just vanished. I panicked. It's my only means of transportation. My parents were a little concerned too, but my sister was acting weirdly smug and kept giggling. I immediately suspected her, but she played innocent and even said, "I can't believe you think I'd do that." I already knew she could be insanely petty, but this was a new level. I said I was going to the neighbor's house. They have a camera, and it must have recorded everything. And then I'd call the cops. My sister suddenly got nervous, and I got mad and said I knew it was her, and demanded she return the bike. She started crying and insisted she didn't do it, and of course, our parents took her side again and started scolding me for daring to accuse her. I said I'd had enough and went to the neighbor to ask for the security footage, and then I'd call the police. That's when my sister broke down and called me, asking me to come back. My parents' facial expressions right after they had just been defending her were priceless. My sister admitted she was just really angry at me for making her apologize when she still thought she was right. That's why she came up with the plan to have a couple of her friends steal my bike during dinner. She said her friends were parked right around the corner in a minivan with the bike. Then she started insisting I couldn't call the police because I'm her older brother. My parents also agreed with that logic, but I pulled out my phone and headed for the door again. They rushed after me. My sister begged and cried for me to stop. I called her a spoiled brat and told my parents I couldn't believe they were still defending her, even after all this. That's when my parents finally hit their breaking point. They ordered my sister to immediately call her friends and tell them to bring the bike back. Through sobs, she dialed them, then suddenly ran into her room to talk to them privately. I didn't hear anything but whispers, and my parents looked very uneasy. My sister would never admit voluntarily that she told someone to steal my bike. She just kept sobbing and repeating that it was all just a joke. She also kept trying to justify it by saying it was a cheap bike. I had bought it secondhand a few months ago for $50, but it was in great shape and my only form of transportation. She kept glancing at our parents, clearly hoping they'd jump in to protect her again. But this time, they couldn't. She just dropped into a chair, hugged her knees, and sat there with us, waiting for her friends. The longer it took for her friends to return the bike, the more panicked she became. She kept texting them nonstop, even though she said they were only a few houses away, but it took them nearly an hour to bring it back. Eventually, they pulled up in a minivan. They had just shoved my bike into the trunk. It was soaking wet and covered in mud, like they'd pulled it out of a ditch. They drove up as quickly as they could, dumped the bike, and took off. I said they stole it because at that point, I was pretty sure my sister had told them to get rid of it completely. If I hadn't said the neighbors had cameras, I probably never would have gotten it back. When her friends finally returned, their legs were muddy almost up to the knees. They begged me not to call the police about the theft. I turned on my phone recorder and asked them directly if my sister told them to get rid of the bike, pointing out the neighbors had cameras. They gave up and said, "Yeah, your sister asked us to take the bike and dump it in a pond a few kilometers away." They'd had to go back and get it after realizing they'd been caught. The bike had been almost fully submerged in dirty water. Luckily, I hadn't installed many accessories, just a detachable headlight and a water bottle. The bottle was gone. I wasn't surprised to hear this from her friends. I made them tell everything to our parents, too. My parents then unleashed on my sister. She collapsed to the floor, sobbing and throwing a tantrum like a toddler. I hadn't seen her like that since we were actual kids. It made me uncomfortable realizing she hadn't really matured at all. She locked herself in her room. Her friends were banned from ever coming back to our parents' house. My mom forced my sister to come out and apologize again. My dad supervised her as she scrubbed and oiled my bike top to bottom, while I disassembled the headlight to dry it. By the time she was done, it was already dark. When she came back inside, she looked at me like I was the devil. But my parents shut her down immediately and said they'd never been so ashamed of her. She ran off crying again. Then I had a frank conversation with my parents about her childish behavior and how it's the result of their constant enabling. I told them I couldn't believe I was the one being the voice of reason in the family, but the fact that she was throwing tantrums and sobbing on the floor like a toddler made it clear. She's still a child in her mind because of how they raised her. They always made me the scapegoat every time she messed up, and now she barely has any sense of responsibility. For the first time, they didn't argue. Later, my dad quietly drove me back to my apartment with my bike in his SUV. He even gave me a little money to buy a new water bottle to replace the one that was missing. My sister and her little crew gave me a hard time growing up. They picked on me any chance they got, and I usually just ignored them because I never really cared about them. That probably annoyed them more than anything. But after the bike incident, I started getting a ton of texts from unknown numbers, insulting me for making my sister cry over a stupid prank. Knowing her, I'm sure she told everyone a completely different version of what happened. I started replying with detailed explanations and said I even had recordings of her friends admitting the truth. Some students at my sister's college found out what really happened. Maybe from my messages, or maybe the friends confessed. My sister was so ashamed she came home sobbing and freaking out. She said people were calling her and her friends bitches and bike thieves. I never went to college, but I know students who rely on bikes really value them. Many are living on pennies. My sister said someone even joked, "Don't leave your bike near her or it'll vanish." She was so humiliated that she didn't leave her room for 3 days and threw herself a pity party. Then my parents called, trying to blame me again. I reminded them of our recent talk, that it was time to stop babying her and let her deal with the consequences of her actions. If she failed her classes again, that was on her, not me. I told them they were just looking for a scapegoat to make her feel better. But she created this mess, not me. I said I wouldn't be the fall guy anymore. My sister's an adult now, and it's time she starts acting like one. They sounded dejected, apologized, and ended the call. I think they genuinely hoped I'd just take the blame again to make things easier for her. But I'm not doing that anymore. Now my parents pretend like nothing happened. My sister and her crew avoid me like the plague, which honestly works just fine for me. I don't need more drama. But if anything like that ever happens again, I won't let it slide. Let's start with the main thing. The bike is fine. I managed to avoid rust after my sister had it thrown into the pond. The bike wasn't new to begin with, and there were no new creaks or issues. I was worried something might be wrong with it, but it's just a single-speed bike. After oiling it, it runs great. I also greased the bottom bracket bearings. A couple of months ago, I replaced the rear tire and tube myself, and I still ride it almost everywhere. Now about my beloved sister. She barely passed her college exams and repeatedly tried to blame her bad grades on me and on the depression she claimed she had after the bike incident. But even my parents eventually stopped indulging her. At some point, they reached their limit. They made her sit in her room and study every time she had a meltdown or complained about life. They even threatened to cut off her internet and phone if she didn't do her homework. She cried and said she hated them, but in the end, she pulled herself together and did what she was told. Somehow, she managed to finish college. But her graduation wasn't a happy event. We all went to congratulate her, but she was still miserable, because she had no friends left. She had hoped to celebrate graduation with her old crew, but they had long since ditched her because she was unbearable. As punishment, our parents made her get around by bicycle. Ironically, she hated bikes even more than buses. It was a second-hand cruiser that our dad bought her. My parents literally begged me to take her on weekend bike rides, just so she would at least get out of the house. I agreed only because they asked politely and offered dinner. The last time we discussed it, my sister still insisted that eating at a hospital cafeteria is wrong, but she couldn't clearly explain why. No matter how many times we asked, no one was on her side anymore. Even our parents admitted they no longer saw it as strange, especially after learning that the cafeteria is an entirely separate business and not actually a part of the hospital. As a gesture to the family, they even came with me a couple of times for lunch there and made my sister come too. She sat there twitchy and kept saying out loud she couldn't believe she was being forced to eat there, even though it went against her beliefs. She said it in a tone like it was against her religion or something. She got scolded for that. As usual, she cried, but this time they told her, "Enough. It's time to grow up." I think she clings to her beliefs just because if she lets go of them, she'd have to admit she was wrong. And she simply can't do that. Sometimes I even think my sister isn't just spoiled and controlling. Maybe she's a narcissist, though I'm obviously not qualified to diagnose anyone. Eventually, my sister's whole crew turned their backs on her because being around her caused them so much trouble. At least 2 of them were involved in the bike theft plan, and when the truth came out, people came down hard on them. So they blamed it all on my sister and stopped talking to her to save their own reputations. Although I didn't press charges, the 2 girls who stole the bike got chewed out by their families. The minivan they used belonged to one of their parents, and once they found out what happened, they banned her from using it again. The parents even came to me personally to apologize for their daughter and asked for a copy of the video I recorded. I gave it to them. Even though all of them were accomplices, the whole group threw my sister under the bus and exposed her to everyone. I think now she finally knows what it's like to be the scapegoat. For a while, people even made fun of her because she had to ride a bike to college and back. Our parents figured it was cheaper than paying for the bus, and no one could give her rides anymore, since she had no friends left. And no, no one stole or broke her bike. She just hated it. Dad also made her learn how to fix and maintain it herself. He was really into bikes in his younger years and still has all the tools. He knows enough to maintain our bikes himself, even though he doesn't ride anymore. He taught me basic repair skills, too. For those who thought my sister might try to do something even crazier or get revenge, no, that didn't happen. She just got bitter. They sent her to therapy, and she seems a tiny bit more reasonable now, but if there's any real progress, it'll take years. At least she doesn't try to boss me around anymore. Since my last post, my parents have invited me over for dinner several times. At the table, my sister barely speaks to me, and it's obvious she's even more annoyed by the fact that I'm totally unbothered. Even our parents have told her she ruined her own reputation, but she still can't stop blaming me for everything, because once again, she needs someone to blame. Since her little prank, every time I visit my parents, I lock my bike with a chain and padlock, just in case. After my sister graduated, my parents suddenly announced that she was moving out. She said openly that she didn't want to, but they made her find a job in an apartment immediately. They said her party days were over, and it was time to learn how the real world works. Many of our relatives had been telling my parents that she'd never grow up until she started living on her own and paying her own bills. My parents hesitated for a long time because she was clearly their golden child, but they finally realized that if they left things as they were, she'd never mature. My sister, of course, wasn't thrilled. She was used to being a spoiled leech, but this time she couldn't blame me for anything because I had nothing to do with the decision, and she knew that. Though in college, she had a few meltdowns like, it was just a bike, whenever something went wrong and tried to shift the blame back to me. At one point, our mom just smacked her upside the head and told her to stop acting like it was my fault. She added that to me it wasn't just a bike. It was essentially my means of survival, my only transportation. Right now, my sister lives in a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 other girls. She had to move farther away so her reputation wouldn't follow her to her new job. My mom even cried when she moved out. My sister now works in an office and is learning basic secretarial tasks, but she constantly complains about how much she hates her current life, even though she's always trying to jab at me with talk about how great her life will be once she starts making more money. I just told her, live however you want, and she got mad that I didn't take the bait. She doesn't get along with her roommates and still rides that same bike my dad got her. Her job isn't far, just a few kilometers. So she doesn't want to spend money on the bus, and walking takes too long. She wanted, or rather demanded, that our parents buy her a car after she moved out, but they refused. After that, she stopped speaking to them for a while. I think it's clear the weekend bike rides with her are long over. Back when we still rode together, she would try to make snide remarks at me whenever she could. I don't even remember most of her jabs because I ignored her and didn't show any reaction. That would irritate her even more. She used to call me dumb or special, roll her eyes, and pull childish crap like, my bike's better than yours, at least it has gears. But she still could never beat me in a race. Honestly, I think our rivalry even made her start getting in better shape. It's like she desperately wants me to be the loser so she doesn't feel like she is the failure. She definitely wants a car, but she can't afford one yet. She can't save money at all. She wanted our parents to get her an electric bike for Christmas, but they refused after seeing how expensive the good ones are. She's already cost them plenty. They paid for all 3 years of her college. As a joke Christmas gift, I gave her a new set of tires for her bike. She gave me a death glare. In 2024, my parents had to bail her out financially several times because she's terrible with money. So, despite reality smacking her a few times, she still acts like a spoiled brat in total denial. But somehow she always scrapes by. And one more thing she's mad at me for now, that I live alone, while she has to share an apartment with roommates. I've met her roommates, and to her disappointment, they actually seem to like me. I think she hates them because they don't do what she says like our parents always did. She can't stand when people don't obey her, so living with people who ignore her whims is probably a personal hell for her. That's pretty much it for now. She definitely wants a car, but she just can't afford one yet. She's terrible at saving. She wanted our parents to give her an electric bike for Christmas, but they said no when they saw how much decent ones cost. She's already drained enough money from them. They paid for all 3 years of her college. As a joke gift for Christmas, I gave her new tires for her bike. She gave me a death stare. In 2024, our parents had to help her out financially several times because she couldn't manage money properly. So even though reality has already slapped her around a few times, she still acts like a spoiled drama queen in complete denial. But somehow she always manages to scrape by. Another thing she's angry at me about now is that I live alone, while she has to share an apartment with roommates. I've met her roommates, and to her disappointment, they actually seemed to like me. I think she hates them for not obeying her like our parents used to. She can't stand when people don't do what she wants, so living with people who ignore her tantrums must feel like torture to her. So, yeah, that's the whole story for now.